I'm here with author Fatima Shaik, author of You, the Economy Hall, The Hidden History of Free Black Brotherhood, which was published in 2021, which won 2022 Humanities Book of the Year from the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, the Best American History of 2021 from Kirkus Reviews. It was listed as one of the favorite books of 2021 by the Washington Independent Review of Books and won a 2021 Louisiana Writer Award from the Louisiana Center for the Book and Louisiana State Library. She's a New Orleans native and a full-time journalist for more than a decade. Ms. Shaik founded the communication department at St. Peter's University in New Jersey and taught as a tenured faculty member for 25 years. Her freelance articles appeared in Essence, Nikkei Architecture, L'Expansion, the New York Times, In These Times, and The Root, and she is the author of young adult and adult fiction. She will also be the subject of the upcoming documentary, The Bengali, which takes her on a remarkable journey from New Orleans to India, where her grandfather came from, the untold story of ties that link African Americans and South Asians in the United States. We can't wait to see it. Welcome and thank you for participating in the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office Black History Month celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invitation.
So this is a beautiful book, research from original documents that came from Economy Hall, as well as a wealth of detail from other supporting service sources. You really kind of fall into history. We almost lost this history. The story of Economy Hall is literally rescued from the ash heap of history in a dramatic save. Can you tell us how you got interested in this story and how your family came into the possession of the Society's documents?
Sure. I'd be happy to tell you about that because this is really a New Orleans story. My father was best friends with one of the last members of the society, the Economy Society, and these were the builders of Economy Hall, a JS Hall in New Orleans. Well, it was known as the JS Hall. The Economy Society actually had left their books. They were emptying out the hall in the 1950s. And my dad's friend said that he was selling off all of the furniture because the hall was going to be sold, but nobody wanted the books. So he put the books on a dump truck to get thrown out in the trash. Well, my dad was teaching at George Washington Carver Junior High at that time. And he was interested in French. In fact, we were going up to Canada for him to study, to get his PhD in French. And so he said, well, I'll take the books if nobody wants them. We put them in the closet and they stayed there for about 50 years. And I was a writer by then. And I looked in the closet and I said, let me look and see what these old books contain. Well, when I opened them up, I saw that they began in 1836, which was about 20 years before, more than 20 years before the beginning of the Civil War. So I looked at the books and I saw some very familiar names that I knew from the 7th Ward in New Orleans. And I realized that these ancestors were some of the free people of color who were in New Orleans and probably some of the most influential people in the United States after I realized how much land they owned and money and their connections in Haiti and Mexico.
Mm. You tell us in the story that you were raised in the 7th Ward and that your community created a fortress of stories about the history of your family and all of the families in the neighborhood, many of whom had been intertwined by generations, for generations by neighborhood, family ties, business, and as you came to find out, membership at Economy Hall. You were even able to access some of these stories talking to neighbors who had danced in the Economy Hall ballroom before it was demolished by Hurricane Betsy in 1965. Just a whole lot of family feeling throughout this book. It's a special thing when we can connect with our family and our ancestors. And not many people know this history.
Well, the history was really, it was hidden in the hall itself, because it was a hall like many of the societies. You know, we're familiar with the mutual aid societies. We're familiar with the social aid and pleasure clubs. And this was really one of the very first ones because it was in 1836. You know, at that time it was still in enslavement. What a lot of people don't realize about New Orleans is that New Orleans, half of the Black population in New Orleans was free. And that compares to about 14% free people of color in the rest of the United States. So from the time that New Orleans entered the United States until right up to the Civil War, half of its population was free. What this created was a situation where they were feared for a great deal, because a lot of these people had come from Haiti. Their ancestors had come from Haiti, and people were afraid that they would get together with the enslaved population and start a revolution. Well, they didn't start an armed revolution, but what they did was promote some very progressive ideals. And these ideals sort of stayed in that community of the Seventh Ward. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of the social and aid clubs and the benevolent associations, most of them started in the 19th century, and they were based on this model that the economy had created.
So the book, Economy Hall, The Hidden History of a Free Black Brotherhood, follows Luja Bogiel, a free man of color who became the secretary of the society in 1857. Bogiel is a romantic, he's a teacher, a principal, and a poet, and he's involved in Economy Hall for many decades. And he injects some of his personality into the minutes of the meeting, making them a little better to read than just some dry accounting, as they would be after his departure, and more like a living document. You can even see some of the ghosts in the personalities in this meeting. He's a good man, and you know, what else can you tell us about him as he suffers this through this power and prohibition that free persons of color had to endure in New Orleans?
Well, Luja Bogiel, actually, he was a good person for me to hang the book on, because a lot of history books, you know, are pretty dry. I was able to take Luja Bogiel and use him like a protagonist in a novel and really follow his life. He lived from 1812 to 1892, so that gave me a real long timeline. One thing that I found out recently about Luja Bogiel, because a friend of mine has been looking into old newspapers that I hadn't had access to, was that he ran a school in 1840. In 1840, you were not supposed to write anything or say, even in conversation, if you were a free person of color, anything that might address your oppression. Luja Bogiel was running a school, and not only was he teaching free people of color and whites, but he was teaching the enslaved, which was against the law. He was doing this in 1840. He was in the Economy Society from about 1852 till the end of his life. Many of the things that he talks about, for example, are the voter registration drives that they had in Economy Hall. A lot of this hidden history, we don't know this history for a couple of reasons. I started to say that, one, that it was kept in my family in these books, and not a lot of the books survived, you know, from that period of time that were authored by Black people themselves. One thing was the books themselves. The other thing was that the history was taken out of mainstream history books. Many times in fact, there were people who came to Economy Hall and tried to burn it down because they were doing things like voter registration. So you sort of see how history repeats itself when you look at things that are going today. Luja Bogiel became a voter registrar. He became a member of the Freedmen's Aid Association, which helped people after the war. And he had many different roles in the community. In fact, his family stays in the community right now.
So, you know, look, a lot of what you're saying is exactly what, you know, we want people to know and understand, that New Orleans was unique, as you pointed out, for having a large population of free men of color and free men of color who were educated, cultured, and skilled business owners. Now, you outline the ways in which all of these changes take place. For example, one of the brothers of Economy Hall loses the shares that he had in the bank, but he's able to sue to get them restored to him. Later, the brothers gain voting rights, but then their hall gets sacked in 1868. And some of the members die in the massacre at the Mechanics Institute in 1866. Can you discuss or tell us about how the free persons of color distinguished themselves in the stresses and solutions that they faced during that period? And how did Economy Hall help support them?
Well, you can think of Economy Hall as sort of a big community center, right? With this progressive group. So you figure this progressive group started in 1836, so that by the time of the 1860s, when we were beginning Reconstruction, right after, actually a little bit before the end of the Civil War, these people had already 30 years of organizing in their community. So when they got the vote finally, and that was after the New Orleans massacre in 1866, after they got the vote, they were able to organize people in Economy Hall, and also because of their deep belief in equality. They had a real belief in equality. They invited everybody. There are passages in the journals that say we invite people of all classes to come to our hall, right? So they had the German Workers Organization in there. They had the voter registration drives. They had integrated the Republican Party, actually. It's not the same Republican Party that we know today, but the Louisiana Republican Party started in Economy Hall. It was an integrated group started in that area, and Luja Bogiel was one of the members of one of the delegates that was at the convention. So they did a lot of work organizing the community as a community center would do right now. The problem was they were too good at it. So when many of them went into government, similar to some of the things we're seeing today, there was a big backlash. There were people who tried to start fires at the hall, people who started terrorizing voters so they wouldn't have the vote anymore. And you saw men like Joseph Sudet, who said that he would fight prejudice for the rest of his life. He was murdered the year after he said it. You saw many men that went in something they called the Battle of Liberty Place. There actually was no Liberty Place when that battle took place in 1874, but there were men in the economy who were part of the Metropolitan Police Force who were trying to have an integrated police force, and people were fighting against that to try to get their governor in a rise of white supremacy, and several economy members died. And then many years later, they named that the Battle of Liberty Place. So you saw this constant move toward progress in Economy Hall until it was stopped entirely by Jim Crow.
So we are recording this on Valentine's Day. And in some ways, when you read about Luja Bogiel, you think of him as just a regular guy. But he was also pretty unusual for his time. He was litigious, going to court over his father's will, and probably being somewhat less than honest in his testimony. And after his first wife dies, he falls in love and lives with a white woman who's a teacher at the school. They have children, and they're together for the rest of their lives, although that was illegal at the time. But we know that love sometimes finds a way, even in 1849. Is that unusual, or?
Well, it's New Orleans. It's New Orleans. New Orleanians know the difference between the letter of the law and I guess the spirit of the law. I'm talking to you, Sheriff, so you know better than I know. But I know that Luja Bogiel, when he went to court in 1845, for example, someone was trying to take a woman who had lived in his house, who was enslaved by his mother, basically, but his mother had come from Haiti with her, and they were trying, well, maybe not this person, but they were trying to keep the woman in this house rather than having her sold. So he and all of his friends told lies in the court. So now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think this book asks lots of questions like that. Like what is the letter of the law and what is the spirit of the law? Because you have to realize that at this time, the letter of the law said that Black people should be enslaved. And in fact, in 1857, the year that the Economy Hall was built and they were having a big party with champagne and cigars, the Supreme Court ruled that no Black person would ever be a citizen of the United States. So, you know, this book talks about the differences in what was going on at the time and what people were trying to make right.
So the Brothers of Economy Hall, they had a very lofty motto: union, fraternity, charity. And but as things got harder and harder on them, and then eventually the Economy Hall gets sold, the society is disbanded. Where do the members of Economy Hall get support and community after that society is dissolved? And do you see any modern day equivalents of Economy Hall?
Well, I think let's talk just a minute about before it dissolved, because it dissolved probably in 1948, 1950s, right? At the time when Jim Crow really stepped up in the 1880s and the 1890s. So that's right before the turn of the century, right? What happened was all of the people that used to go to Economy Hall during Reconstruction and when they were organizing during the Civil War, they all came back to Economy Hall. And to support themselves, they had parties and they gave money to charity, like the Sisters of the Holy Family, like the Eye, Ear, Nose, and Throat Hospital, like Corpus Christi School a little bit later. So what they did was they turned inward and they built a lot of institutions that exist in the Black community today. Many of these people became politicians, like Walter L. Coyne, Medard, who Medard School is named after, Armand Bédou, who was a photographer. So you saw a lot of people in the community working in the community at that time, and less on the national stage, you know. Let me, before I go there, when they were meeting, like when Bédou was there and Medard Nelson was there and Walter Coyne was there, they'd have these big parties. And who would play at the parties? Some of the earliest jazz musicians. So what you found in Economy Hall, if you start looking up Economy Hall, for example, what you see are first references to jazz music, because Danny Barker played there, Louis Armstrong played there, all of the greats that you know in early New Orleans music played in Economy Hall. So it was an incubator. I believe coming out of that political discourse that they had in those almost 100 years of organizing, they had a reputation and people wanted to play at Economy Hall.
So it really influenced the whole world, you know, because jazz music is what New Orleans is famous for, and along with food and the Mardi Gras. But so they really help the culture and the economy of Black people.
Oh, well, they definitely helped the economy of Black people, and they definitely created a culture for the world. I mean, in the 1920s, when Economy Hall was really going, we were in the jazz age, right? That was, they named it the jazz age, you know. Economy Hall helped people because of that mutual aid theme that they had from their very beginning. What they wanted to do was help one another, teach one another, and hold out a hand to protect humanity. That was their motto. So from the very beginning, they helped one another. If somebody wanted to build a house, they would put together their money and help this person build a house. If somebody needed to make a loan, they would help the person make a loan. When somebody died, they had money together to take care of the widow and the children. So this kind of community organizing and helping one another lasted that whole time. And I dare say, you asked me about after the Economy Hall closed, I dare say that spirit lasted in that community and in that area, and really in New Orleans in a lot of ways, until now, really. You know, people are still giving money to the institutions that was started with Economy Hall, with the members of Economy Hall, like the Sisters of the Holy Family, like Corpus Christi, like some of the churches, the Tommy LaFawn School, the Old Folks Home, all of these places that we know as institutions that have been around for so long were helped by societies like the Economy Society. And in some of them, it was started by the Economy Society.
So do you think Well, look, I think we need to have another economy hall. I can see how the benefits of it, as well as, not just the camaraderie, but like you said, the support that you can give to your fellow person, your fellow man, fellow woman. So what's your hope for that?
Well, I think it was a real model for mutual aid, right? And it is. I mean, we can do it in any sort of community, with groups of people that you trust. I'll tell you something else that they did. They lectured each other all of the time. So if some person started going astray, they would call him in front of the brotherhood, and the older brothers would talk to him. So I mean, it was a real model. The older brothers would tell him, well, there's a big long lecture about one guy was beating his wife, and there's a long lecture in there about how we as men should uphold our wives and be the support of our families, So, and another time, another guy hit one of his friends on the street, and they make the two men standing together in front of the whole group and apologize to each other and then give each other a hug. I mean, so it was not just helping each other with money, but it was guidance and mentoring and trust, So I mean, I think it's a wonderful model for people today.
Yeah, so this is a history that should repeat itself. Uh, Lots of times you say you don't want you know history, so you don't repeat it, but this is one that should repeat. Now, I want to thank you for all your time, but before we go, I just wanted everyone to know that we have a connection as well through my son-in-law, his family. So, you all are related. So I feel like since he's a part of my family now, you are too. So thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Sheriff. And I know it wasn't because I'm your relations.
And we wanted to make sure everyone knows about this book. And thank you also for donating some copies. And I think a lot of people are going to enjoy reading this, as I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.